Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. I fucked it up somehow just now, but I don't care. I'm going to keep rolling with it, you know? I'm going to keep rolling. I don't care. I lost my train of thought. I reverted to an ape-like version of myself, and I, for some reason, just wanted to be like...
You are looking a little hairier than normal today, John.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying.
Yeah.
I've been taking a lot of growth formula from a COVID variant.
Interesting.
Got my hands on a vaccine. Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. I am your host, John Garcia. I've just learned to speak and form thoughts recently, so you'll pardon my my blurbs here where I mess up, bloopers and such.
Yeah, you've moved beyond one word to full sentences.
Yeah. And joining me on this episode, my usual co-hosts, Ryan King.
Hey, how's it going? Only good thoughts about viruses on this. Right.
Only good thoughts. Only good thoughts. Definitely skip through that first 2 minutes of trauma in the movie. And also joining is Michael Dixon.
What's up? Yeah, interested to talk about this movie that predicted COVID 6 years before COVID happened.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. The film that we're talking about is not Contagion, which everybody out there is always like, you should watch Contagion. It's all about blood. Fuck that movie.
I never understood why when COVID happened, like that was the most watched movie online for like a month was Contagion. It's like, who wants to watch that right now? Who wants
to put themselves through this?
Yeah, we're already doing this. I don't need to watch it again. Like, I watched it all day today on the news.
Yeah. We watched a much more fun version of Contagion. Some thrills in it. And that is the sequel to the soft reboot movie that Ryan actually talked about previously, right? On another recommended
Yeah, I
review?
think we chatted about the kids and I were watching Rise
of the Planet of the Apes. Yeah, so we're talking about Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
We don't mean any harm!
I know why you're scared. It took us 4 years fighting that virus, but we are survivors!
It was a virus created by scientists in a lab. You can't blame the apes.
Who the hell else am I gonna blame? We need to give them a chance. Welcome, they're animals. Please. I've seen things. I've seen the way they are. They want what we want, to survive.
Caesar, home. This is your home. Your home.
Are you aware they are going to turn on you? They don't want a war. No, don't shoot!
Which somehow comes after Rise, which is very confusing to me.
Yeah.
Just bad naming convention.
Directed by Ryan's favorite Batman director, Matt Reeves. And he shakes his head. Starring primarily Andy Serkis, and also Judy Greer is in it, which we didn't know.
Yeah, was shocked to see her name in the ending credits. No idea who she played.
She's Caesar's wife, Cornelia, which I was like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
This movie, this entire film franchise up to, which I just saw recently, The Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which is a dog shit epilogue for this, was I didn't realize, choreographed by Terry Notary, who also starred in The Square, which I've also watched. So I've been on a bit of a binge for Terry Notary, I guess, recently as well. But we'll
Is he
talk
a notary?
He might be a notary.
Yeah.
The premise of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, if you don't know anything about Planet of the Apes, it's all about a man going into space, coming back to find out that not even to Earth,
it's a planet of apes.
Planet of apes, and then twists and turns happen.
Dr.
Mark
Zaius, Dr.
Wahlberg
Zaius.
is in one of them.
Ooh, Dr. Zaius.
Dr. Zaius is the villain in the first and second one until he's blown up by an atom bomb. Spoilers, everybody. But yeah, there was a soft reboot of this that grounded it, made it grittier. It made the actors actually behave like apes instead of just actors in ape makeup talking like actors. And I had a buddy in town recently who was like, you gotta watch like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes again, man. It's great. If you watch Kingdom and you didn't like it, watch Dawn. It's great. And so it got me on that kick. And Dawn follows up after Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where James Franco has released a virus. James Franco and Malfoy have released a virus together, technically. The virus is an ape evolution virus and also intense trauma and hatred of humans. I guess those go hand in hand with being a virus socially and genetically. And our main protagonist is Caesar, the chimp who has inherited this evolutionary trait of being able to think, basically to start evolving, and has this rapid evolution of intelligence. And Dawn starts off with the apes establishing a tribe together. They're trying to live in peace. It's been 10 winters since they've really seen any humans, or no, 10 winters since the outbreak started that like devastated the world, known as the simian flu, which was engineered in a lab in Wuhan. In a lab in San Francisco. And the whole point of this movie is just watching the apes kind of like live in their tribe, try to figure out how to establish their civilization. And when they discover that some humans from a nearby civilization in San Francisco, it's like a small colony, are trying to get power back to their city, it sparks up all kinds of political strife and questions about what does it mean to be an ape that is evolving into this higher cognition versus like, what is humanity now? Where is humanity going? Like, what separates humans from apes? There's a lot of like, they're not like us discussion in this between the characters. And it's kind of watching Caesar and a character, I can't remember his name, but he's played by Jason Clarke.
His name's Jason Clarke, I think.
Jason Clarke. It's Jason Clarke and Caesar. They got to figure it out together, how they can forge a fragile alliance and a peace to benefit each other. And well, spoilers, doesn't go well because there's a movie called War of the Planet of the Apes that comes after this. Whoops. But I watching this again. It's been a while since I've seen it. I absolutely love the score, which is done by Michael Giacchino, who did the Batman score. He's partnered with Matt Reeves on a lot of his productions, it seems. It remixed parts of 2001's sounds at the very beginning, which is really rad just to hear that. And to see it underscored and to not have it be like hit you in the face with, hey, we're just going to straight use it. It was really fucking cool. And then,
I did keep waiting for the monolith to show up.
Somewhere. But. Yeah. It's a metaphorical monolith this time around. So the score is fucking great for me. And then the CGI is top tier. I think when Dixon and I were watching it, I turned to you and this is like an overstated thing, but I was like, they really don't make blockbuster movies like this anymore. They just don't try to go as hard as they did with the effort. Like, I think there's a cast of 6 actors who play all of the apes, and they all had to learn different choreography for each of them. And they just like did a lot of technical evolution to actually make it possible to track them outdoors, to track them in the light and not fuck up their facial capture and their mocap and all of that. And it shows, like, there's so much painstaking effort done in it, and so many cool shots too, and like fucking great action.
You can't even tell it's Al Pacino.
Yeah, you really can't.
It's wild.
It's just, yeah.
He looks so much younger.
That's right. But they start the beginning off and Caesar's all shaved and going into the Boston police force. I didn't even know it was him. But yeah, I really loved this movie. I had a great time with it, the thrills and all that. I'm excited to get into it and talk a little bit more about it, but I'll kick it over to Ryan. What did you think, having freshly watched Rise? How does this stack up?
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember Rise like kind of coming out in the theater, and I was already like, there's so many bad Planet of the Apes movies in the original series, and then I had no interest in the remake, and it just got terrible reviews, and everything I've seen of it was absolutely terrible. Mm-hmm. So they kind of like going back to the well for a third time, I kind of questioned it initially, and then hearing it was like different I was like, okay, whatever. It really was when this movie came out that people kind of kept being like, oh, Rise was good. Rise was good. You should go back and give it a shot. And this one isn't like the Planet of the Apes story, even though the first one kind of seems it could potentially set up Planet of the Apes. This wasn't just immediately Planet of the Apes. It was like kind of continuing in that. And I do find it interesting if we go to a franchise and actually explore something else. Like if we are so interested in the franchise and the setting, why don't we like look at some other characters or other potential or other time, and not just like keep hitting that dead horse. I will say I'm going to use monkey and ape probably interchangeable through this because monkey is a funnier word.
Zoologists out there.
Monkeys have tails, Ryan.
Yes, I know the difference, but monkey is a funnier word. And to our future ape overlords, I apologize now, but it just was a funny word. That's why I did it.
I, for
They think
one,
monkeys
welcome
are
our
funny
ape
too.
overlords.
Yes. So I caught both of these together. Like watched Rise and then Dawn. Like bam, bam. About the time Dawn came out, and then went to see War in the theater because I enjoyed them both so much. Rewatching Rise, and I probably talked about this on the podcast. It does feel like it's like an hour 50 of ape torture. And then like 10 or 15 minutes of like retribution and like outlet from all of it. But it is good. Like it really hits the emotional like lows, really not many highs. It hits the emotional lows really well. It knows how to pull at the strings. It's kind of manipulative in that way. But I think Dawn is where it really gets something like new and interesting. Like we're actually looking at what if humanity is going down and the apes are coming up, like where do they bump into each other? What are the problems? How do they deal with each other? And I really think this one nails the we're not different in a good way of like both there are good leaders, there are good people, there are good apes and good leaders, and then there are bad humans who just want to fuck shit up, and there's bad apes who just want to fuck shit up. And like all of these bystanders, right, in this escalation that feels like kind of any like if you had two separate human tribes bump into each other anywhere, they're going to fight over something inevitably. Like it just feels like that's what we go to. I do like that it doesn't necessarily make the apes like all clear, like the humans are everything. It does sort of make this like maybe it's intelligence that like pushes us to this level where we really start scheming or thinking ahead or whatever potentials. And then I think that there are more human characters that are relevant in this one than just James Franco. He has like a girlfriend who's just a plot device, and his dad is part of it in Rise. But again, he doesn't have a lot. He's sort of more part of the plot device. Here we get the several other humans and their potential. I like seeing the city, and it's a different post-apocalypse than usual. This isn't the like it just went to Mad Max or like 28 Days Later or something like that. It's does feel like the humans know like the end is coming, but they're actually trying to hold it
there's
together.
There's a lot more hope and optimism, and they trust the CDC a lot more.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Trying if there's a connection out there or not, like trying to get together. And I do think that like that touch, I'll just mention the one off before we get into the movie, but like when the power comes back on and Gary Oldman's like first thing is to pull up pictures, like to look back at like that he had the people he hasn't been able to see, in so long, like that's the thing that they're thinking of, right? That very human feeling, very human emotion, not gasoline or whatever. So many other movies.
Guzzling, Ryan.
Guzzling, Bullet Town.
Bullet Farm. They grow them from the ground.
And Gas Town. But they pump gasoline out of Gas Town. It's fine.
I think it's good. I ended up liking War as well, going and seeing that. I haven't seen Kingdom again because I'm like, it's too long. There's a certain amount of like, how long do you wait to make a franchise? And the fact that the original people aren't related to it makes it even less appealing. And then, people were kind of lackluster on it.
It was like rewatching. Sorry, before we get into Dixon's take on it.
Oh no, don't worry. I'll just sit over here quietly. You guys do your thing.
Rewatching Planet of the Apes, the original one with Charlton Heston. There's like a whole plot point about him being from Fort Hood, Indiana. And at the very end,
not Texas,
of Kingdom of the very end of Kingdom of Planet of the Apes, the humans get power back on. Spoilers, everybody. That movie fucking sucks anyway. They get power back on and they immediately, similar to this movie, go into the radio and they're like, is there anybody out there? And immediately somebody's like, we hear you. We're in Fort Hood, Indiana. Wink, wink, like to everybody out there. And I was like, who the fuck is here? Hoping that they would get that Charlton
Does that mean
Heston
the next one is going to have a
one.
Charlton Heston stand-in?
Oh, God, that would actually
makes no
honestly be
sense,
great. They're
though.
going to get that actor from Solo, Star Wars Story, to come in and play a young
Oh,
Charlton
no.
Heston.
Oh, no.
That makes no sense though. Didn't he just he left a regular Earth on a spaceship? He had
Exactly.
no-
He totally
That's
did. It makes
nonsense.
it doesn't. I don't know why they shoehorned it in. Is really dumb. But anyways, that was what kind of was like. I don't know.
Fan service? Is that what you like?
Anyways, Dixon, what did you think of Dawn? Because it's your first time seeing it, right?
It is, yes. Of the new ones, I have only seen Rise and Dawn, and I've only seen each of them once. I saw Rise in the theater and, had heard good things, went to go see it, and was very underwhelmed. It may just be that I have a James Franco problem. Like, I just can't buy him in dramatic roles. Like, I've just never really been able to get past that. Like in a Seth Rogen stoner comedy, great, no issues. But in a serious role, I kind of always have trouble like buying James Franco as
Would
whoever he
you
is.
have bought him in like Harmony Korine's Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
Potentially. I haven't seen Spring Breakers, but potentially in a Harmony Korine movie, he could make more sense. If he was just high all the time, then yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Like most Harmony Korine characters seem to be.
He would have gotten high with that chimp. That would be great.
Yeah, him as a scientist doing experiments on apes just didn't really work for me, I think. And I don't know, I just was kind of bored with it and never thought about it again after I left the theater. And I kept hearing good things about Dawn and War, and people like, oh, these are so good. I was just like, fuck that. I'm not falling for your bullshit. I'm not doing it. And so I stayed away from the sequels until now. And John picked Dawn for the podcasts and forced me to reckon with the apes again. I really enjoyed this. I was very pleasantly surprised. Obviously, I knew that John liked it, and so I was optimistic going in. But I thought it was really interesting. The CGI was way better than it had to be, which I really appreciated. And after seeing so many terribly rendered CGI movies over the years, I was very impressed. Seeing the work that went into it. Jason Clarke was fucking great in this. Like I kept waiting for him to turn evil because he always does in every movie. There's a point where Jason Clarke turns evil and you're like, oh, you didn't see that coming, did you? And I'm like, of course I did. It's Jason Clarke. I've been waiting for this the whole time. But he never did. And he was great as a protagonist who was very earnest and trying to make things work with the apes and try to coexist with them and each side to get what they need. And I thought he was incredible in the role and played a very endearing character that, really gets you to empathize with what he's going through. Andy Serkis is obviously very good in the role of Caesar. I feel like the core of the movie is really between those two guys and kind of how they deal with each other and then go back to their separate groups and try to communicate like, hey, here's what we need to do. The apes need this. We need this. Let's come to this compromise. And like, we have to coexist. We can't just fight them. But of course, the worst instincts set in on both sides and more on the human side than the ape side. But there's the one crazy guy, Koba, that, kind of forces everybody's hand. But I thought it was a really interesting movie that kind of explores the dynamics of colonization and, a more powerful group versus a less powerful group and how those interactions tend to go. Whether it's American colonization or other things like that, the natives agreeing to treaties and wanting to make things work and the, colonizers forcing their hand on them and not abiding by the agreements and resulting to violence at like any one sign of, the first sign of, oh, maybe they broke a specific very minute letter of this thing. Oh, we're going to attack. And, I feel like it was kind of about the human nature to just go to violence immediately, right? Like the survival instinct and the stupidity combined with that, right? Where it's like, you would think the survival instinct would lead to both the humans and the apes being like, hey, we should probably figure out how to live together and do this. But they just are incapable of trusting each other aside from, Caesar and Jason Clarke, and everybody else is just so terrified of the unknown, right? And like, you know, viewing the other group as less than them, and that their rights should be prominent over the others. And it just felt very human to me, the story. It's kind of the, you know, tale as old as time, but done in a very effective way. There were definitely some tropes that I didn't care for that were, you know, it's like the human on the good guy team who's got an itchy trigger finger and he's an asshole and he's going to cause problems. And it's like, I've seen that character a million times. And I thought he was terribly written and terribly acted. Didn't much care for that guy. You know, there are things like that it was like, yeah, this is kind of a tropey thing that's going to happen. There were things that didn't make any sense at all. That's like when the humans go try to find that weapon store and like, we got to test all these weapons. And that just means two guys firing all of the bullets they can find. You know, like, it's like, I think it works, dude. You don't have to keep shooting bullets. Maybe test some of the other ones. You know, there are grenades. Are there other things that you could test? No, we're just going to fire these machine guns as many times as we can.
I feel like that kind of speaks to, because it's funny to think about that. Yeah. It's funny to think that that's what they're like, oh yeah, we're going to test it. But like everybody in that city doesn't seem military, because like they contact the military by the end of the movie. Spoilers for folks out there. Yeah. Allegedly they contact them. And so that says to me, also you see like a few people in there. There's like a throwaway trope of like the nervous guy, his like first war, who's like shaking and Gary Oldman's like, you're going to be fine. And then he's dead like 2 minutes later. Yeah. But like all of that speaks to a town that has only ever known like the comfort of consumerism and kind of living in their homes and doesn't really know how to pull together and has managed to do it at this point. Yeah. And so like, I'm sure that those guys were probably the dudes that were like, oh man, just like let a war break out. I'll fucking go to it. I'd do anything. I could totally kill all these apes. And like, they're like having too much fun firing off the guns and testing shit, which they get their own comeuppance. Those are some of my favorite scenes are with those guys in Koba.
Yeah. There's also that trope, I think very early on in the movie, where somebody, I believe one of the apes is like talking about his future plans. You're like, oh, he's fucking dead. And then immediately gets killed. You know, it's just like stuff like that. They're like, all right, you're just like kind of scraping the barrel here for like movie tropes. But like I thought the script was very good. There were moments like that were kind of like crutches for it, I think. But I thought the story was very well told, very well acted. Jason Clarke and Andy Serkis were great in it. So
yeah, it was also one thing that I noticed about this movie, that comparing it to, and I know neither of you have seen Kingdom and neither of you will, unless Ryan is on a flight somewhere and it's on the plane.
Might happen. That might happen.
The first, God, how many, is it like first 10 minutes of the movie are like there's no dialogue really.
Yeah.
At all. It's, you know, like I remember people saying like WALL-E was bold to come out as a Pixar film that has 45 minutes of no dialogue to open it up. And then like you get to now where it's like Dawn has 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, and then you see your first human and they talk and whatever. Kingdom, it's like 2 minutes in and the apes start talking just normally. They're like fucking bantering, like hanging off of a rock and like, oh man, I hate that I have to go to class tomorrow. And you're like, oh fucking God damn it, this shit. And it's just one of those things where I feel like now a producer would be like, no, we can't do that. We gotta have dialogue jammed everywhere in here.
Yeah.
Because like Joss Whedon's rule of filmmaking is to put jokes everywhere and make it funny and make the characters endearing that way. And like here it started with just fucking Caesar's eyes, super intense up close shot of that. And the like monolith, like chanting music in the background as they're all just waiting to go on a hunt. And then it's just like straight into it. And I don't know. I just lamented it. I haven't thought of other movies since then that like really try to do, let's not do any dialogue for a while and like let it roll out. Probably an A24 film if I'm like Lamb or something.
Have you seen Once Upon a Time in the West?
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah. That's got some great no dialogue to start the movie.
But yeah, is there any other movies that y'all can think of like recently that have done something like that have kind of, I wouldn't say it's like had the courage to, but like they had a vision clearly of like what could carry an audience's attention?
Nothing off the top of my head. I'm sure there has been something I've seen in the past few years because I see lots of new movies, but there's nothing that jumps out to me as like a very memorable, silent, several-minute opening sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for like a movie this expensive, like this big of a caliber. I think probably more independent movies we could certainly find examples, but I don't think there's like a AAA movie that is brave enough to do something like that. They're definitely like have to get a joke in or something, get you going, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that opening sequence, because that is pretty. It's an intense way to establish where the apes are at currently, and because we have the monolith music in the background, the fucking awesome kind of like roar of a crowd chanting, screaming, whatever the fuck they do when they're raising their voices, and it all culminates in just like a big like elk hunt, caribou hunt. I don't fucking know what they have in San Francisco. Ryan, you're in California.
Yeah, I don't
what kind
think
of wildlife
I don't
they got
know.
out there.
Some sort of large mule deer, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm guessing things spread, like, right? Like the plants and animals spread since there's not so many humans in their way.
Yeah, and they get like, you get that whole establishment of, we watch them hunt. We see Caesar and his son try to take down one of whatever the fuck they're hunting, and then bear almost like revenants them.
Yeah.
Like comes out of nowhere. And it's
The bear was the one CGI thing where I was like, that's maybe not so great, but the Revenant bear was better for sure.
I need to go back and watch the Revenant, because I also remember the bear being like kind of borderline in that too. And I'm like, I want to compare now. I want to know. They're probably both done by Weta.
I think they shoot it a little less clearly in that it's like choppier
yeah.
editing and more frantic, so it like
shake it around.
It looks real for what you're seeing. But like this one, it's just like, here's a shot of this bear growling, and I'm like, oh, his nose looks weird.
It's like wet. Yeah, the fur is just like a little too shiny and wet.
Yeah.
And we see like the ape village where they all go back. They've captured all their food, and Caesar's gonna have a baby, and him and Maurice are hanging out. That's when you get to kind of like know some of the other ape characters. I remember the ape character names better than the human characters.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just like, oh, it's like Rocket and Maurice and Caesar and Koba. Like, fuck yeah, these are my boys.
And the humans are Jason Clarke and Kerry Russell and Gary Oldman and
Exactly.
that weird guy with the trigger finger and Cody Smith McPhee.
Yeah. That's exactly. That was all of their names. I looked it up on IMDb. It said but you get like a contemplation. They're all talking in sign language. You get to see so many establishing shots of also like the frames are just really rich, like colorful kind of, it's that dense woodland kind of hues and greens, and like the mist and like kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it really benefits from them shooting on location, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
they CGI'd the characters, but they have the actors there in the woods shooting that stuff in like Northwest Canada, and it looks really good on film, right? And like so many movies would have just CGI'd the whole thing, right? It would have looked shit, but like it's cheaper and whatever. Actually, it is more expensive to do it that way. But going on location, it makes it look so much better, and it's just it just looks really good.
There's like so many things that the actors could interact with if they wanted to in the scene that could make it better. The other thing being like, just the ape choreography in general is used like to the maximum that it could be. Watching people like kind of move around, watching Caesar move around, that kind of stuff. There's definitely a grander sense of like their presence in the space. Whereas, again, going back to Kingdom to just kick the crap out of it during this episode, all the apes just kind of walk around, and they don't really climb things unless they need to for the plot. They don't do ape-like things like swing for fun. When like you have that scene where Jason Clarke is getting pulled into the camp, and he's being dragged in by the gorillas later, and he's looking up, and you're watching like all of the apes swinging overhead, and he's like just in awe of what they've built so far and how fucking terrifying the community is to him. But yeah, like I feel like in this first segment before they even meet humans, it establishes everything that Hollywood has since forgotten how to do because of like green screen, volumetric, that fucking volume thing that they use for all of the Disney movies now, where you're not shooting on set, on location, you're not building sets anymore. And it just was like, oh my God, subconsciously I was like, what is different about this? What exactly is it that's standing out to me? Because I've just seen so much dreck lately. And I've been like, I don't even know how did they make it better?
That's normal for you, John. You've always seen so much dreck lately.
I do have the brain rot. It is a chronic condition. But yeah, what were y'all's thoughts kind of like the lead up to even, let's just talk like opening act stuff, like anything that stood out in particular?
I definitely like that opening hunting scene was badass. Like that was really cool. It was shot really well, a lot of dynamic moving cameras, and just really cool to see like a highly choreographed hunting party that they like clearly thought about. What if apes had hunting parties? What would it look like? How would they do this thing? And it was cool to see that play out. And then, going from there into the first interaction with the humans, it's like, that like, oh, these people have no fucking idea what they're getting themselves into, right? Like they think they're just happen to cross some monkeys and then, like they can, figure this out. But, they don't realize how far advanced the species has become at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the real strong point of these movies is the CGI work, that your main character is CGI, right? Like your main character is Caesar, and kind of like we said, remembered more of the apes' names than the humans' names, because they have different expressions, different ways of carrying themselves. Like there's all this that the actors are actually putting into the motion capture, and I think the environment also helps the actors get into it, right? And I think some of this Andy Serkis knew. I'm betting he brought some of it with him from working on Lord of the Rings, because they shot on location, but he was doing things like he was talking about as Gollum, he was having to like actually flop around in the water trying to pretend to catch a fish, and it's like freezing water, and he's like actually having to do it, right? So it's an actor that's putting himself out there. I think it makes a difference, right? You're actually stepping on twigs and brushing up against the tree. Yeah. Like you see like it's not effects when you see the water like splashing, where one of them is walking, because that's actual water. It just makes it more seamless. Where I think, when you have it all green screened, the scene between the one real person stands out a little bit more. You just kind of feel like everything is a little meaningless. At least here you're like, oh, the environment's real. You buy in more to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think, establishing them like as characters in of themselves, like starting off with that of like, it's their society now. Like this is their world, this is how they do things. These are the characters that you're following. Don't get distracted that there'll be humans here in a minute. Like these are important characters to follow.
Yeah. Seeing that, like the camaraderie too, because they all like the apes have banter themselves. And I was just talking about how like the beginning of Kingdom, they're like, I hate that I have to go to ape school tomorrow, and like whatever the fuck they do.
Yeah.
Why would they be talking in a foreign language amongst themselves about school?
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
Like, English would be their native.
It doesn't, but it's because the Planet of the Apes
Caesar
movie has to happen, and I guess Caesar knew. So
I guess Caesar knew English, and they were in Muir
But they
Woods,
clearly
so
like
speak
English sign
books.
language as their first language with each other.
Yeah, and they also have
True.
like the guttural. They still have non-communicative, sounds that they would use, and it's fine for them to continue using that. But yeah, for whatever reason, they're just like, we are all speaking English now, fellow kid apes, and like here you have the same banter, but like done in a way that feels, I don't know, it's just more. It's much more natural. It feels fun. Like you were talking about the trope of, I'm sure you were talking about Ash who gets shot. As like the one that was kind of tropey, where he's like, I could have taken all of them on, and it's just like they're doing the exact same thing that like a couple of bros would do. And you're like, just like puffing their chest up and talking about it. And Caesar's son, I guess it's Blue Eyes is his name. I don't fucking know if he had a real name beyond that, but he's just like, yeah, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. And even when he talks to Koba says like an uncle, it does like an uncle thing. He's like doing like some joke about how like scars make you better, scars make you strong, and he like laughs about it in like an ape way. It's not just like like after he says something, he does like an ape laugh. And just those moments continue to like draw you in to continue to buy more and more of what Terry Notary is selling when it comes to choreography. I don't know if you've all watched any of his behind the scenes stuff. No. That dude goes to some weird meditative place where he forgets he's a human being. And I know you've seen the Square, Dixon, so you know that that's possible for him. But he was talking to somebody from like IGN, the gaming news journalist site, and they were just like, can you show us some of the stuff that you do? And I saw the interviewer get visibly concerned because Terry immediately was like, like just like doing that, and was like fucking pointing and poking at him in a way that made him uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, this guy knows how to tap into whatever fucking animal we are. This is scary.
It's like he's going to be that way for the next 6 hours or so. He'll tuck her out at some point.
Yeah.
It's hard to get it back from that space.
Apparently to the point where like in the war for Planet of the Apes, he brings his kids and they actually know how to do the ape performance as well as children in the movie, which I was like, that's fucking wild.
Is he one of the actors in the movie too?
He is Rocket. He
Okay.
plays Rocket, and all the like bonobo sounds that Rocket makes are just Terry Notary doing that. And it's like, okay, I thought
Is he the one with the butt face?
kind of again, no. You're thinking of Maurice, or the orangutan. Rocket's the one that like that son was shot like by the fucking trigger finger dude. But yeah, so like I was impressed too because I thought a lot of those would be canned sounds, but a lot of them are actors actually tapping into the ape sounds that they can make. Huh. So it's not even like we went to a zoo and we recorded apes until we got what we needed. It was like, no, the actors know how to make the sound because Terry taught them how, which is fucking wild. So, but yeah, let's talk about, why don't we talk about when the humans come into the picture? Because fuck it, like the apes have been established. It's time to get some of the boring people out of the way. Like fucking the dude who can't play it cool to save his life, literally.
Mm-hmm. It's called the simian flu, man. Fucking apes, dude. We gotta kill them all.
They want me to wear a mask, man. No way, man. Not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core of the plot is interesting where like the humans are trying to find this power plant to like restart it and get it working again to supply San Francisco with power. The apes don't even really realize it's there, but it's like in their territory. And humans are like,
it's not at the borderline.
Yeah, it's on the borderline. They're trying to figure out like how to navigate that. Or like, oh fuck, we just came across these like all these apes. What do we do? And like Jason Clarke having a cooler head is like, all right, we have to work with them. Like, I'm gonna go bring a few people. We'll talk to the apes and be like, hey, like just let us use the power plant to turn our lights on. Then we'll be gone. Like, that's all. We can coexist. We just need to do this, be here, work for a few days, and then we'll get out of your hair. And like everybody else or every other human is like, we're gonna fucking kill them all. It's like, if you don't come back in 2 days, we're just gonna start bombing the apes, and you gotta get back here and all this. And so it's just that tension, and like the importance of communicating successfully with the apes, telling them what they want to do, and actually doing the work to get the power plant online is life and death, right? It's a huge, the stakes in this movie are very big. And so it's an interesting dynamic, and there's always tension between humans and apes, and humans and other humans, and apes and other apes on how they tackle this problem. And like, do we just have peace with each other and let this go on, even though they shot one of our apes and all this, and or do we just have to resort to war because we're insane people?
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating the way that this has technically like 4 factions going against each other because of the way that the politics work within both civilizations or both encampments. And going back and watching like the original Planet of the Apes, it's just a Twilight Zone episode that's like stretched out over like 2 hours or whatever. And it was written by Rod Serling, so I can say that, and it's confident that it would be that. But like even then, the apes, they have some infighting. The infighting is all things that like humans would have infighting about, but like at a more advanced levels, like religious doctrines, where Dr. Zaius is always like, yeah, we can't do this because it's like sacrilegious. That's like his whole shtick for that entire movie is just, you can't do this against the ancient scrolls written by some fucking ape that wrote them. And they don't really question that. And then Charlton Heston is just like, it's a madhouse, like constantly. But here it's like you're actually getting much more nuanced philosophical takes, like strategic takes that make logical sense. They aren't just the doctrine says we can't, so we can't. Like they're not like ape, not kill ape the entire movie to defeat any conflict that they come into or to help subvert like conflict between each other. Instead, it's like what cost, what is there that we're willing to sacrifice to save ourselves? And like Koba and Caesar asking themselves that question the entire time. And so while Koba is ultimately the villain of the movie who sort of drives and ignites this war, he is doing it from a place that he has naturally been born into. Like they talk about it constantly. And we get that whole sequence too, after Jason Clarke has negotiated to have them come to the dam and do the work. And Caesar's like, they're just going to do their human work. Like that's all they're going to do. And Koba starts like rhetorically, like human work, like pointing to different parts of his body that have experiments and other shit on them. And it's like this sobering moment of like, yeah, I get exactly why this guy is pissed off, like why he would not fucking trust these humans and not want to do anything with them. It doesn't, I don't know. It made me kind of torn to an extent to like, I wish that Koba and Caesar could have come to some pact as it went, but it just wasn't meant to be.
I think it's interesting looking at that particular point. If you go through watching all the end of War of the Planet of the Apes, like watching the whole thing as a trilogy, there almost is this like, there has to be this generational handoff, like the things that happen to Koba, you know, the assumptions that Caesar has, the knowledge he has, you know, about humans, like the next generation, like Blue Eyes, like actually has to be the one to like move the apes forward to be something more, because they're not bringing, like Caesar's bringing what he knows from humans and like just trying to adapt it, and Koba's bringing all the pain, you know, of the past that they've moved by. I think you kind of have the same thing with the humans in this movie of like, there's, it's hard to just get past the past.
Yeah.
Right.
It is
and those
a sins of the
expectations.
father sort of story.
Yeah. And it's interesting though, I would say, like, I don't think I thought about it until this time around, that the humans have no clue what happened and why they're these smart apes.
Yeah.
Right.
There's that whole sequence too. What is it when they march, the apes march on the town, and like only Jason Clarke and kind of Gary Oldman know, and that like small troop know exactly what they encountered in the forest, because Gary Oldman's like, don't tell anybody about this. Okay.
Right.
And then there's just a fucking army of apes, and Caesar like war painted going, ape not want war, but will if necessary. And like, as a citizen, you have to be like, what the fuck did we just step in? Like, what is going on?
Yeah. They're like on horseback too, right? Like, yeah, like it really kind of gives that strange feeling, which is what the apes on horseback in the original, like Planet of the Apes, lended to the, like the bizarreness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that trying to piece together like the humans not fully grasping what they've hit at or how smart they are, and that's what kind of like keeps leading to this. Because I think if at the beginning they fully knew, like, oh fuck, they're like as smart as us, maybe more, and then they are physically stronger easily.
Yeah.
So, like, we kind of have nothing, and we've just been scrapping by with kind of the way humans can, but they're built to live in the wild and live out there, right? This is some of what like Jason Clarke's trying to tell them all, right? Of like, they know what they're doing. They got it. They have a society. We're the ones in the weak stance here. Yeah, but that's not how humans think.
Yeah, you're right, Ryan. They are like the Equisapiens.
Equisapiens out.
Yeah, and there's that other character that mentions that too when they're sitting around the campfire after they've gotten their kind of permit to work, and he's like, you know, what's really scary is they don't even need lights to like survive. They don't need any of these things to really thrive. They're just totally fine being out there. And it is one of those things that like makes you wonder to what level our technology and everything that we've built has softened us to like survival skills, to if anything happens, if there's a solar flare or an EMP, like how many people are going to panic? How are people going to know what to do? Man, during Snowpocalypse, whenever the electricity shut down, I was just like sitting in a dark room waiting for it to come back. And I was like, there's got to be something I could be doing to try to survive. But I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, we're too far removed from that to have any sort of real survival instincts anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that, like, you know, Ryan, you mentioned like the apes are you know, potentially smarter than the humans. I think they are, and I think one of the kind of profound moments in the film is where Caesar, has been betrayed by Koba, and he is talking to, I believe, Jason Clarke and some of his family, and he's like, I made the mistake of thinking that like all apes were better than all humans, and like it's not the case, and I realized that we're much more like humans than I thought, and it's very upsetting to come to this realization. And like he has to realize that there are bad people on his side and there are good people on the other side, and there are bad people on the other side, and like you have to figure out how to make an agreement between the two groups by having people with good intentions come together and try to establish something that works. And, I think that's something that like a lot of times people, when we're in wartime situations, nobody really thinks like that. It's like, well, yeah, this guy may be an asshole and maybe he's kind of going too far, but at least he's not a fucking Ruski, like that type of attitude that, just leads to dehumanizing of the other side. Like, well, we are a civilized people, and we, depending on what you mean by that, right? The humans in this movie are like, well, we're civilized because we know how to do electricity and shit, and these are just animals. And the apes are like, we don't kill each other. Like, we're are much more evolved than you because we just don't resort to just like petty killing and nonsense that you guys do. And then it turns out the apes kind of devolve over the course of the movie, right? And end up becoming more human-like as they are sucked into kind of the human world and pulled into that. And so, but yeah, I think that's kind of, at the core of the film, like you have to realize the humanity of your opponent and the inhumanity of some people on your own side, right? And understand how to navigate that.
I think there's also this piece to it that I was kind of curious about, because we have kind of the importance of like images, of memories. Like Caesar finds when they scare off Jason Clarke and his group, his son drops his bag and they find that book of sketches, and Koba is already like, we need to find them and kill them. We need to just kill these humans wherever they are. We should attack them before they attack us. And Maurice is looking through the bag of things and finds like the sketchbook and finds a photo of like a boy and a woman. And it's like assumed it's got to be his mom who died in the outbreak. And he's like sketching her into the book. And Caesar kind of recognizes that photo, recognizes that this is a parent and this is the child. And like, these are, they deserve some kind of peace here. And then again, like later when they go to San Francisco and they stop, when Caesar's injured, they stop in his old house. They find all those photos of James Franco. He's like, he's looking back on them fondly. It's really a beautiful moment to watch how far he's come intellectually, to see visibly like the nostalgia on his face, and also that he's using that. I feel like nostalgia, as overrated as it can be now in a commercial industry where like nostalgia is exploited and mined for coin, nostalgia serves an important purpose, and it is to empathize and connect you to other people, to share, to find some nugget of you that's in somebody else, like to have that experience. And I think watching that video of him with James Franco, where James Franco's like, Caesar, like, eat, like, say this, and he's saying it, and it's him at like a much younger age. He's just so happy watching that and kind of content. And like, it was simpler times when humans and apes could kind of be together, and now he knows that there's no way. And he kind of says that at the end to Jason Clarke, where he's like, there's just no way that we can, apes started the war and humans not going to forgive. Like, there's just not going to be that. But it's fascinating to think about that. Like, if there are other creatures on the planet that have nostalgia. I had never actually thought about it, where I'm like, dude, like octopuses get nostalgia. Do anybody else? But I don't know. What are your all's thoughts on that?
Oh, I think a lot, we're learning more and more about animals that kind of freaks us out more and more. And this is kind of a good movie to look at, of like, what if something around us is at that level of intelligence or understanding and has those, it isn't even just like what you might think of traditional intelligence, quote unquote, of like making things and using tools. There is like this emotional intelligence. And I think that's really even more where both the apes and the humans connect with each other, is seeing not like, oh, they can use tools, but it's that like, oh, they think of relationships the same way we think of relationships, and they think back on these things and they feel the same kind of emotions we feel. And that's really when it connects. And honestly, that's like what connects any human to any other human, right? And like humanizes, you're talking about like the other that we use, for war or whatever to kind of like hide and mask our enemies so that we can like work together. But once you do humanize them, not dehumanize them.
Yeah.
Once you humanize them, once you kind of like put names to them, right? Like know their names and that they have families and that, right? That's where you start to realize how fucked up war is or how fucked up any of this is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it's interesting. You're right. Maybe like octopuses and dolphins and even like dogs, we're learning more shit that they actually know that every time you learn it, you feel bad.
Yeah.
And also the fact that you're like, it's not going to change anything.
Yeah, it won't.
I've always thought it's interesting that, kind of the arbitrary selection that humans have over like the animals that it's not okay to do bad things to and the ones that are, it's like if it's a pet, if it could be a pet, then you can't do anything bad to it. If you can name it Fluffy, then you can't do anything bad to that species. But like, if it's a cow or a chicken or whatever,
it's a bug. You just
pig or a
squash
bug.
that shit.
Yeah, it doesn't fucking matter, And it's like, it's interesting how we do that with different forms of life. And it's like, oh, you can't, test makeup on dogs or something. It's like that's evil because they're dogs and they're so cute and sweet and whatever, blah blah blah. But like, nobody's complaining about testing on
Rats or
rats or whatever. Yeah. Nobody cares.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to a little tangent. We'll go on for a second here on intelligence. I was listening to a podcast where they brought on a scientific journalist who's talking about like cutting edge science about plant intelligence and how plants don't have brains, but they do have like feelings and adjustments and things that you could argue is an intelligence, like a sign of intelligence that conditions other animals to their will and will change them. Like there's some plant in South America that it's a vine that's invasive that will actually morph and change its shape and texture to match other plants near it. And so people were like,
oh, wow.
The science community is like, does it have vision? Like, what the fuck? How does it know what to do?
It's like an octopus or a chameleon or something.
Yeah, it's got that kind of like vibe to it. And that podcast, the host was like, so what does that mean for like the vegan crew out there? And I was like, yeah, I know that's going to come up. People have talked about cucumbers having nervous systems and how like, oh, John, you're still eating something that feels. And I thought that the scientific journalist did this fantastic job of saying like, there is something core within being a human, within just being alive, where you will have to come to terms with the fact that you perpetuate violence at some level of your life and that you will just have to be okay with that. And like, where do you draw your line and how are you trying to devise it? And what moral framework do you work from there? And like, I was like, that is such a nice way to kind of put that, as opposed to the comparative, like you're eating something that's alive. Doesn't that make you feel bad? It's like, well, everything's alive. It's hard not to eat something I can't eat a rock.
Yeah.
It's fucking hard to do that.
And so, you have some people that are like, I draw that line at plants versus animals, and other people that are like, let's do genocide. It's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Other humans, not a problem. Let's get rid of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when I was eating vegetarian and I was stopped and thought about like clams and mussels and oysters, I'm like, they're more like plants than some plants.
Yeah.
They just sit there and suck stuff up and spit it out. And I like looked it up and saw that like early vegetarian groups actually fought over whether that was okay or not.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I was like, okay, so there is some amount of like, it isn't just like animal, quote unquote. There was this like argument
that led you down
like,
the slippery slope back into full on carnivore.
It made me feel okay with pescatarian.
Oh man. But yeah, like that whole concept of intelligence, it's interesting that this movie just sparks that. And I think that it does. Yeah. It sets out to do it. Being a Planet of the Apes movie, I wouldn't expect it to do that. Okay. Yeah. The original Planet of the Apes movie is, wow, ape people, isn't that fucking weird? What a gas. And like,
we're still better.
Yeah, we're still better. And it ends with that, like, damn you blew it all up. I guess a cautionary tale of, if we went to nuclear war, we'd all become apes. I don't really know what the message was. But yeah, and then the rest of that series, that original series, was just franchise milking.
It's fucking nonsense.
It's fucking best.
Yeah, bad sci-fi sequel nonsense. Yeah, I think that this movie does touch a bit on the fact that we do think we're sitting here talking about like intelligence and what it is, but humans really aren't that far. Like current humans, Homo sapiens, aren't that far removed from, whatever it is that just came right before us. We technically haven't evolved. There's always this thought of like, oh, you bring Brendan Fraser forward into the future, and then he's the caveman, like just like us or whatever, right? But realistically, I think if you brought a caveman here as a baby and you just raised them, like they would just fall right into society. And there may be some things where like, we're probably a little bit
vocal
taller
cords
than
or
we
something.
were.
Yeah, we've
like,
gotten physically larger, but that's probably about
but
it.
like not that much in the scheme of things, right? And it's like humanity, it takes these millions of years to actually get to like a difference, and humanity hasn't been around that long to have really been that different from that, ancient caveman. And then to think the same thing in this movie, it's like the apes are the apes. Like they've picked up this intelligence, but they still have all those same internal tendencies that an ape would have, which is to violence as well. Like it didn't just go away. Like being smart and reading a book and pretending to have a government doesn't just make things like now we're real good and we're all nice, right? There's still that core animal.
The colonizers historically have always lauded that they're not savages, and yet they're the ones that slaughter and kill and rape and do terrible fucking things that they accuse the oppressed of doing. And that's history, baby. That's human history.
Written by the winners.
Oh, man. I want to talk about like two really fucking cool scenes in the movie that happen towards the end. Just because I don't know that I've seen them done in another. I mean, I know I've seen one of them done, but the attack on the like San Francisco little city by Koba when it's what is it, like Saving Private Bonobo or whatever the fuck it is, however you want to call it, Saving Private Blue Eyes, where he like takes Caesar's son after Koba's staged Caesar's death and is like perfectly framed, fucking shitty trigger finger McDude. Yeah. And
that's another trope in this where it's like bad guy kills good guy, but does not stop to check his pulse and just moves on. And
Exactly. Yeah. He's like, well, he fell from a cliffside. He's got to be dead.
We're good.
There's no possibility that he could have survived that.
I chalk that up to Koba being just really, really bloodthirsty for the humans. He's got a big, big thirst for human blood. And that whole sequence where they assault the like gates is so fucking terrifying. When it just starts with like, initially it's all of the military people standing around that fort. Military people, I mean, it's like, Harry and Larry, whoever the fuck the guys are that usually test out the guns.
Testing the AKs
after they drink their Johnny Walker and get shot, and Koba takes all the guns. They like storm that base, and everybody, you get like the first moment of horror in the movie. There's a lot of like tense scenes, but I think that's the first visual horror is the like guards that are running to get underneath one of the trucks and hide, and one of them doesn't make it and just gets fucking dragged by a gorilla, and he's like screaming and pleading to like be saved. And then it leads to like that big charge where Gary Oldman is just machine gunning all of the apes possible, shooting grenade launchers everywhere. There's like apes on fire screaming and horses that are coming down. It's so fucking intense. And you just get really, really badass slow motion shots of Koba with like the heat of the flames. A lot of the scenes after a certain point in the movie, Koba is shot like behind flames, behind like the heat waves of just fire and hatred. And it's always like his motif anytime that you see him. And when he grabs like both guns and is shooting at the wall, and then suddenly like a cavalry shows up with that tank. That's the scene that I really want to talk about. The camera work there is what I noticed, because I don't remember that when I saw it the first time, but this time around I was like, holy shit, this is really cool. You get the camera mounted on the tank side.
Yes.
And it's spinning around, and he's like, he fucks up a dude and throws him out. He goes inside and you don't see anything, and you just hear a dude scream, and he comes back up, and it's like, oh my God, you ride it all the way up to the walls and it just rams in. It's so cool. Just, I don't know. I thought about like Children of Men and like those kind of sequences where it's like the oneer that's just done in that way. And I just like tip my hat to Matt Reeves and them for pulling it off, because I enjoyed the hell out of that sequence. So fucking cool.
Yeah, that was a badass sequence. That all of the attack on the human fortress was just really well done and just so well thought out. Like just way more choreographed and well thought out and well shot than it needed to be, right? In most movies like this, it's like you get shaky cam and hard cuts and you can't really tell what's going on. It's just like, yeah, you know, they're fucking like attacking the thing, and you know, then we're here now. And they just put so much care into that scene and clearly thought through like, what can we do that would make this unique, that would make this fun for audiences.
Yeah, and they like it. You also get to watch a battle because, let's talk about Jarhead 3, Ryan. Let's talk about Jarhead. Any of these military schlock movies where you have a firefight, and yeah, it is what Dixon is saying, like, oh, it's shaky cam, and they get up.
All the Expendables movies.
I'm pinned down. Right. Oh my God, I'm ticketed fire, and they're just sitting behind a wall and like shooting occasionally and doing nothing else. But here it's like you're watching two sides and the strategy evolve in the choreography of the war that they're having, the skirmish, and so you get like that moment of Gary Oldman's like, get me the rocket launcher. Like, just fuck it. We're out of other options. We need a rocket launcher. Let's blow up. He blows up like a truck full of fuel tanks that they just had. I don't know why I was there. I don't care. He blows that up and it lights this wall of flames that he is so confident the apes could never get past on horseback. He forgets they're fucking apes. Yeah. And Cobra is like, climb.
They have thicker skin than you.
Yeah. And so Koba's just like, climb, and you immediately get a completely different skirmish. Like the gunfire goes from the ground to the wires where they're swinging from and shooting and climbing. And it's like, that is the evolving threat that scares the shit out of you. That is what like made Aliens fucking terrifying, and like other piece of these other action movies where like you have a threat and it just evolves with you the moment that you're trying to fight it. Mm-hmm. And that was, I don't know, just like the way that's handled, so fucking good. And it bleeds into the next scene that I really liked, which is after Caesar is incapacitated and Jason Clarke is like, we need to get medical supplies. I guess, Kerry Russell, you stay here. I'm going to go in, and I know it's a war zone, but I'm going to sneak in there and I'm going to figure it out. And we get like a oneer of him running into the building to try to find the medical supplies.
Yeah.
Where he's running like hallway to hallway, and it's handheld the entire way. And I'm sure that there are some cuts in it that make it kind of like, it's not all done in a oneer, but it's impressive to not only show the actual the combat out front, but have that view of you're trying to sneak around in a war zone. You're trying not to be seen by, you don't know who the fuck's going to shoot you. Could be ape, could be human. Doesn't matter at this point. It's even later that Jason Clarke is like, has to identify himself by voice really loudly to avoid being shot. And so it's just one of those like nerve-wracking situations where you're like, oh my God, is this guy going to like fucking live through this? Is he actually going to be able to get it? Or the fuck's going to happen? And I'm sure if you read into cliches and tropes, then it's going to be he runs into an ape, and the ape happens to be Caesar's son, because we've seen enough sequences of that nature. But it still has this cathartic payoff where you're like, oh, fuck. Like, it just, the tension carries you to that moment of like, oh, I know probably what's going to happen, but I'm hoping that it's that thing that usually happens. Because if it's not, this is going to be fucking brutal, and I don't want to see this.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of movies, you kind of know what's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think, Ryan, in one of our recent episodes, you were talking about, like, it's like, it was in the Iron Claw episode. You're talking about how Batman's going to beat Joker eventually,
yeah.
Right? But it's like the way that the story is told has value, right? And if you can tell that story in a fun, convincing way, or a dramatic way, then like that's a good movie, And it's like I'm of the view that like spoilers don't matter, I'm like, I don't care if I know what's going to happen. If the movie is good, I'm still going to have a good time, right? And like, maybe if it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie or something, I don't, want to know the twist or whatever, but so few movies are like that. And I think if it's good, if the movie is good, it still won't matter, right? If you know that thing. And so even if you're seeing a scene where it's like, yeah, I think this is probably going to happen. If it's told in a captivating way, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And that
And I
speaks
think
to the filmmaking.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, it's shot so realistically that's important in making it sell in this movie. Like it needs to be more static cam, shot like a war movie, like you said, because we are supposed to feel for both sides. And I think if you kind of gloss over the fighting or you try to make it like too cool, like a more modern cool kind of look to fighting,
Yeah.
it removes it. Like you have to sit there and feel viscerally there and sick on both sides. You just want it to stop, right? You don't like the apes need to win or the humans need to win. You're like, can they just stop fighting, right? Can this end?
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get all those sequences of Koba like brutalizing humans just because they're not even like fighting back anymore at one point.
Yeah.
Like when he kills Ash, that's like he was just like, yeah, fuck it. I'm like done. Caesar's dead. Doesn't matter. Koba time. Let's do this. Here we go. I actually thought about this because I watched Civil War recently. We were watching it. I saw black and white snapshot photos of apes like beating the shit out of humans. I was like, "Where's the ape Kirsten Dunst?" All right, what kind of ape are you? Like Jesse Plemons' ape? Any of them? But yeah.
That's funny. Jesse Plemons would have been the trigger happy dude that was just shooting all the apes.
He would have been so good too.
Yeah,
He probably would have done a really good job of hiding that shit. Oh man. Well, did y'all have anything? I mean, like the climactic final battle sequence, I feel like was really well handled. We all kind of knew where the movie was going. Like it had to be. I don't know. Even when this came out, I was like, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a third one. So like Caesar kind of has to live, or maybe his son, fine, whatever. But had a very Lion King vibe to it.
Yeah. He even fell off a cliff.
It's true.
Yeah.
I will say I did enjoy the fight choreography of the final sequence. The fact that it took place at the top of this tower where like only apes could probably climb to, which was cool. And the fact that Caesar remembered the number one rule of boxing: exploit your opponent's weakness, exploit the damage. He knew, he learned from Ray Liotta. You don't operate a bar and serve underage girls booze. I don't think that he
You
learned
mean
that
Robert De Niro?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Robert De Niro. No, Ray Liotta. Wait, was it? No,
Raging
not Ray.
Bull?
No, not Ray Liotta. Fuck, what is his name? Jake LaMotta.
Oh, Jake LaMotta.
No, Jake LaMotta.
Jake LaMotta, Ray Liotta, Cocaine Bear, Robert De Niro, whatever. My brain, it's
That's
piecing
funny.
them all together.
I thought you were confusing different Scorsese protagonists, but you were just...
But I was confusing
Yeah.
the rhyming names. Rest in peace, Ray Liotta. You did nothing with underage minors that we know of. No bars that were open.
We're gonna
with
leave
your
it
name. Yeah, we're gonna just go back and edit that through. just put Jake LaMotta over all of them, even up to when you say you mean Robert De Niro.
No one will have any idea why we're laughing.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be like, no, Jake LaMotta and Jake LaMotta. But yeah, like I thought that the choreography at the end of the fight sequence, really great. I mean, it was done in a way that, again, plays to the restrictions of the apes themselves. There's a lot of climbing, swinging around. There's a lot of sick disses going on back and forth about who is ape and who is not ape. And I thought that it gave like a good cathartic ending to, we waited for so long. There's like a whole sequence where even before Koba challenges Caesar, loses, and then immediately is like, forgive me. And we get this final comeuppance of him being like, ape not kill other ape. Like, come on. And Caesar kills him because he's not an ape, is what Caesar's assertion is.
Yeah.
I am interested for you to see War of the Planet of the Apes, Dixon, because that whole sequence at the end of this movie leaves like a traumatic mark on Caesar, and it impacts him in the entirety of War.
Oh, interesting.
Where he's constantly still just like, he like regrets doing that. So it's interesting to watch him explore that.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to check out War. I also love Woody Harrelson, so
Hell yeah.
Yeah, definitely down. Check it out.
Steve Zahn's also in that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
As a monkey or a human?
As a monkey.
Okay.
He's a comedic relief monkey. He's bearable enough. He's good.
Interesting.
Good. I like Steve Zahn, so
Yeah. It was good.
but yeah, did y'all have anything else for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes?
I do want to talk about the scene where they're just testing machine guns and just shooting off into who knows where. Like, I don't think they really ever show where they're shooting, like what they're actually shooting
like
at.
a car or something. I thought.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. But like they're doing that, and Koba like is infiltrating the humans to try to like get dirt on them. He's trying to convince Caesar and the apes to go to war with the humans. So he's like out on a scouting mission trying to figure out what's going on at this artillery area where they have all these weapons. And he sees them shooting guns and they notice him. So he just starts acting like a dumb ape and like scratching himself and laughing and hooting and hollering and all that. And the two guys shooting are like, I don't even remember if they have redneck accents, but they might as well. Like that's the type of characters they're playing.
Where they are,
right? And they're like, hey, fuck, it's an ape over there. What are we doing with that? You know, they're just like drinking scotch and shooting bullets, and just like it's a really funny scene where Koba is so much smarter than them, and he like avoids getting shot by acting like he's just a dumb ape who kind of stumbled upon there, and they think they're so much smarter than he is. They're like, oh, it's just a stupid monkey. What? Oh, you want some scotch? Like, you know, just like try to get him drunk, and they think it's funny. And it's a very interesting scene that kind of contrasts the two species right there in the same scene, where you kind of have one of the smarter apes and two of the dumber humans interacting together, and you see the massive intelligence gap there between them.
Isn't it fascinating how our minds go to that whatever that southern twang is for people that are lower intellect? That's kind of fucked up. I feel like
it's also that they're shooting guns and drinking.
This is true
at
too.
the same time.
There's just a lot of that like. I remember, I think that there's like a Red Letter Media where they talk about that, how in like 8 Mile, isn't it like Eminem's mom has like a redneck accent in Detroit, Michigan? It's like, thanks Hollywood. Thank you for perpetuating this fucking stereotype.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, I do remember one of them is like, you lost, boy? Like he just says that. And I'm like, what the fuck? I do love Koba's dumb ape playing. It's really fun. Those sequences when especially when he takes a shot of the Johnny Walker and does a spit take on them. They're just having a great time. It's all hanging out.
Yeah. And then he basically like gets intel and goes back to the group, and then he goes back again and does the same dumb ape trick and steals their guns, kills them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's like, even though Koba is like, you're not wanting Koba to be successful, you're rooting for him in that scene.
Yes. Yeah, you're actively like, all right.
Yeah, those guys, it's at least the next day, and they're still in the same spot drinking scotch, shooting guns randomly into the distance.
Right.
Again, that is one of those things where it's like, that nobody's military trained, or if they are, there's only a few of them to organize, not enough to oversee. Oh man. Yeah. Anyways, the end of the movie, big climactic battle, and then it ends with like that. There's that like callback to where they're like, we contacted a military base, and they're gonna come through soon. And there's like a sequence of Caesar and Jason Clarke. That's like the last emotional scene. Jason Clarke's like, maybe I can stay. Maybe we can talk something. You know, we can forge peace. And Caesar just it says like, no, there's no way. You know, ape started war. Humans not going to forgive. And then we bookend it. We end on Caesar's eyes, just like we ended. We started the movie, like up close, just like looking into those deep, expressive eyes. And it, again, another flex from the CGI department to just show you how fucking good this movie is.
I think too, that last scene it's like Caesar's devolution, right? Like he is now becoming more human and realizing like, I guess my only option is war, right? And like, that's such a human instinct to be like, that's the only, I guess that's all we can do at this point is just fucking go to war, you know? And like, there is, you know, if there's ever a chance for peace, you have to fight for that, right? Like there's, like war has to be the absolute final option when you've exhausted everything else. And Jason Clarke, well, maybe we can talk to the military and figure it out and come to an understanding. And he's just like, nah, fuck it. Like, we just got to fight. Like, he's probably right that the humans won't forgive them regardless of what they say or what they try to do. But like, you have to try. Yeah, you have to try and exhaust that and try not to lead to more death, what apes and humans, and it's interesting to see that it's kind of a very strong downbeat at the end of the movie where you're like, fuck, like as apes are quote unquote evolving, they are just becoming more like humans and thus more violent and vicious and unempathetic and just kind of losing their humanity, for lack of a better word. I guess they're gaining humanity and losing their apeness or their innocence or whatever that may be.
Yeah. It's a tragic ending too. It's like Caesar embraces nihilism, basically.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, nothing fucking works. Can we talk about Ape Together Strong real quick? Because Ape Together Strong, everybody. And I remember Dixon being like, we should have there's no time for votes, everybody. This is a fascist state that we occupy.
Oh, yeah. No, the apes definitely have a little fascist empire there where Caesar just does what he wants.
I remember I made some joke where I was like, Dixon, you can't have the lower class voting. You have to establish an electoral college first to guard against it. This is me being drunk and probably just ignorant enough, but what is there a positive to fascism? Because like,
okay,
I'm
did not expect the podcast to go in this direction.
No, I want to talk about it because I thought about it and I was like, I could have Googled this. I want to be educated in person when we talk about this because like fascists, the whole like. Caesar even demonstrates it using a literal fascist, where he like breaks a stick with Maurice and then he grabs a bundle of sticks and tries to break them. And he's like, that's strong. I don't know if that's this movie or Rise. I think it's Rise when he does that. He basically demonstrates that fascism has benefits to how you can stick together against people. And I thought about that in the context of a union when you're like, you all have to stick together and you have to suffer and endure. Like the writer's strike, the actor's strike, like it required people to make sacrifices to stay strong. And it like, I'm not saying that you should embrace fascism, everybody. Please don't do that. Don't lose your identity to a crowd.
I'm going to edit this so you're just saying embrace fascism.
Shit. I am saying that you should embrace fascism. Hard copy. Got an interview with John. We talked about fascism. But I was like curious about that in the root of the movie and just like philosophically here, asking that question, like, is there a benefit to picking and choosing when to be fascist and when to not? Like what the apes are trying to do, they have thankfully they have a benevolent enough dictator to their fascist regime that can lead them. And that is something that like, I'm sure audiences are like, Caesar's a great leader. Just like totally bend over for him. Like, why not do everything? Koba's a fucking piece of shit. But like, what are y'all's thoughts, like takes? Just fucking let fly. Please educate me.
Okay, I have lots of thoughts on this.
Go for it.
First of all, Koba's solution is just different fascism, right?
It's true.
Like he just wants his own fascism. Like he's like, no, I run the apes now. I do what I want, and you don't get to do what you want anymore.
Yeah. He Joseph Stalin's it.
Yeah, he does. He is. Yeah, very much
right.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think your point about unions, I think that's interesting. Typically, I think unions are better when there is more democracy within a union, right? And when you are able to elect a union leader who actually wants what the workers want, like a lot of problems and corruption in unions is when you have like the union leaders getting in bed with the company and like propping up bad union leaders who are just wanting to, cave to what the company wants so that they can get kickbacks on the side and like not actually fight for what the workers want. Like the auto union had that problem for a long time. And then finally they were able to elect Sean Fain last year or the year before. And he was like, kind of coming up from the workers and was actually wanting to enact worker policy. They were much more belligerent in their negotiations with management and then got a lot more wins, right? And they still went on strike, and like you have to understand when you're in a union, if we go on strike, that's what we do.
We go
like,
on strike.
I don't think doing that is just like being fascist, right? It's like you're understanding that you're trying to negotiate and get what you want. Obviously, it's hard to hold people together in a circumstance like that and get people to agree, hey, we're going to not work and not get paid, and it's going to fucking suck, but it's going to be worth it because we're going to get more of what we want.
Yeah.
But I think you just have to communicate that, right? Like the solution to, kind of holding people together and trying to get past what you want is just more speech, more democracy, like trying to make it so, everybody can have a voice, can say what they want, but like you have to put a convincing case forward.
It sounds like the main difference here between, and this is me, I wasn't trying to reduce unions to fascists or anything. But like it's an interesting thought exploration of like what does make it different is that a union still instills a sense of agency within its members to actually form an alliance that's strong and can stand against something, whereas fascists usually revoke the agency of the collective in favor of the strength that they can unify under them. So, all right, cool. That's been clarified. Ryan, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I guess theoretically you can back out of the union and it worsens the union, right? The union can fall apart if people just don't.
It can dissipate,
partake, right? It can dissipate.
Well, that means the union's probably not doing a good job. It's not fighting for its workers and making it worth their while.
Yeah.
Where fascism can take a turn and then not be good for the people, and they're stuck, right?
And then you're chucking babies off cliffs, and you're starting battles of Thermopylae.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a powerful tool that can bring together people with different backgrounds into a common cause by setting up this other that you have to go against, right? And then we can all work together against the other, and now we're similar, which humans want to be, right? They want to kind of like include in similar. So it's sort of abusing that. I think the idea of a benevolent dictator is really the huge fallacy because maybe you do, but then what?
There's an eventual breaking point.
Right. And it can't be, and I think that's where you can kind of look and be like, maybe democracy is not this like great perfect system. It isn't a perfect fucking system. Maybe it's not a great system, but it's at least built on like, we can't trust each other. Right. It's kind of the core of like, we know someone's going to come along and try to fuck this up. So we're going to build a system that's too hard to fuck up, like takes too long and too many people to potentially fuck up. Eventually, I guess it can, but it is different from like a fascist thing where it's like one, like we saw in, Death of Stalin, not exactly the same as fascist, but the same sort of dictatorship using the fear to control people to this common cause. Like one person goes out and the whole thing becomes unraveled, right?
Yeah.
And that's, with Caesar's gone and immediately you see Koba leading the apes that are just like,
devolves.
Okay, I guess we're at war now, right?
Yeah, it's a mindless thing. It is, it's antithetical to what Caesar would have actually wanted, which I think that it's kind of like this, I don't even know, Caesar just became their leader and they just embraced that. And I don't know that Caesar even recognizes that that's a problem, but it is one of those things where like he would have I'm also kind of confused because I feel like if anybody ever instilled that level of like loyalty in people and they were like, look, I'm going to set up a lot of policies that if I was ever in this fucking headspace, you could evict me as a leader, that it would probably make people do that faster. I don't know if that's like a political thing that I'm just like, the Soviet Union kind of historically has been like, oh, there's a loophole where I can seize power. Fuck yeah, I'll do that. Tell me all the weak points in this. But it was fascinating to think about it for a little bit there and like put it into that frame. And I'd never really thought about the union versus a fascist sort of philosophy. And so I wanted to broach it here.
That's interesting. I think also, like, generally, I think there are obviously exceptions to this, but I think generally, if you get a big enough group of people together, like, I feel like they tend to come to the correct decision. Like, if you poll the American people, it's like the vast majority of people believe that the rich should be taxed more,
Yeah.
right? That we should have like better social programs, that we should have better healthcare, that we should have all these things that like, you know, we need a more like we should have a more morally just society that isn't so top heavy and all these things. Most people don't want to be fighting these foreign wars that we're funding. Like there's all these things that like if you actually get it to democracy at its purest form and just poll people, most people agree with like, you know, what I would say is like the morally correct decision, where it's like we are promoting the poor, taxing the rich, not fighting wars, things like that. But then you end up where democracy doesn't work is where like, because we don't really have democracy in this country. We have like an oligopoly that is owned by Wall Street and big business and all these things. And so like
What?
you have, I know it's shocking, right? Shocking.
My God.
But like, you know, elected officials aren't voting for things that their constituents want. They're voting for things that their donors want. And so like you have a bought and paid for system, not a democracy. And so, you know, you end up with like people talk about, oh, democracy, just so, like, look at America, it's so fucked up because like, you know, people just disagree on all these things and there's all this strife and all this stuff. It's like the moneyed interests pour money into dividing the common man and making everybody disagree with each other. And then they all agree that we should fight wars and give all the money to rich people. And, you know, so we end up with this weird fucked up society that doesn't make any sense. Right.
Yeah. So it's the republic side of it that's what's abusable and weak. And and our capitalism is too strong and reinforces itself in being more and more capitalist as it can. I think that Caesar is the ruler, just sort of, de facto, he's the one that got him out. Yeah. But also like apes do naturally have a system with a leader, right? That's one of the interesting things about looking at them. Well, you know, I'm generalizing all apes, but
you specious.
Like, like gorillas and chimpanzees like have that system, a hierarchy system, and so I can see that they kind of like fall into that, and I think that's where once Koba like wins physically, which is like the traditional way of taking the power, they just follow him blindly. The scene where he's like dragging the other ape like up the stairs to then like throw him off the top because he disagrees, and the other apes just sort of like follow along to be like, who's gonna win, and like that's gonna decide it for us. None of them, like, even though you're right, probably all of them are in that same spot, right, where if you polled them, they're all probably like, no, we don't want this. This is fucked up. Like they go along with it because, well, that's the leader now.
Well, I mean, humans have that tendency too, right? Like, you know, there are countries that want to have monarchies and dictators, right? And like even in America, you know, you look at different swaths of Republicans or Democrats, they're like, we just want a strong man, right? It's like,
right.
You know, that you remember during COVID, like everybody in the Democratic Party wanted that asshole New York governor. I'm blanking on his name. Andrew Cuomo.
Oh,
They're like, and there were all these people online being like, you know, oh, we just need Cuomo to come in and solve all of our problems and to fix everything and just have all these. It's like, whatever side you're on, like people fall into these fascist tendencies of like, we just need a strong man to come and fix all of our problems because we don't want to think about them anymore.
Everybody's a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
Oh God. That's let's bring it back in, everybody. I let everybody off the rails for a little bit there. Fascism is bad, kids. Don't do it. Don't do fascism.
I'm glad you've come around, John.
If anybody offers you fascism in an alley, don't take it, even if it's free. The metaphor of fascism is still useful. The sticks, you know, like showing unity, sure. You're edging there, but don't go farther, okay? Don't politically endorse it. Well, before we do our would you recommend it or not, I just want to leave everybody with the interesting tidbit here that Koba, if he wasn't this intelligent, would have resolved his problems the right way. Bonobos historically solve all of their conflicts through sex.
Oh,
so they would have had sex, and that's how they would have resolved the conflict. Caesar and fucking Koba.
Interesting.
Yeah, but bonobos are trippy. Like they have like heterosexual, homosexual. Like they don't really have like relationship definitions as much. Like it's just who's the closest one to me.
Yeah,
they're sounds one like of learn. No.
Yeah, if not the only.
Love the one you're with, baby.
Yeah. If not the only, they're one of the only that that does oral sex.
Oh,
other than
wow.
Like, yeah, like it's an interesting, like, in the evolutionary line where you're like, oh, I guess
for
we
them.
shared something with bonobos.
well, given that fun fact, or those fun facts.
Are you talking about the pants company? the one that makes the khakis?
They perform oral sex.
Yeah. That didn't happen to me. But
I would like my money back
next
please,
time.
for those pants. Well, I would recommend this movie, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Ryan, would you recommend Dawn of the Planet of the Apes?
Yeah, I recommend all three of the trilogy. I can't speak to Kingdom. Sounds like you can.
You liked Rise?
But
It was good enough.
I
It's good enough.
do. I think it's good enough. I do think that Dawn and War are better, and Rise just helps with the, like, getting you into the thing. I mean, you can kind of just, like, get the, like, a YouTube synopsis, I guess, of Rise, and
Yeah.
you're probably fine. You probably didn't really miss much.
When I sat
But I
down to
think
watch
that-
it with John, and I was like, hey, I don't remember anything from Rise. Can you fill me in? And he was like, no.
Yeah,
It's like,
Yeah.
I think it'd be more interesting if you just watched it without any context. I was like, okay. And I did. And I was like, I feel like I don't need any other information. Like, it stands alone as it is.
Yeah.
I would say
Really, it's just
Yeah.
like the virus gets out. The virus is what makes apes smart and kills humans.
that's all you need
Yeah.
to know. I would
Yeah.
say if you ever watch Rise again, it's really more of the technical achievements that are really cool to note about it. Like, I don't want to say that it could be in the Criterion collection because it's got James Franco in it, but like they did have to figure out how to do mocap and facial recognition, like capture in daylight, which is a big thing that fucks with the infrared sensors of the
Oh,
mocap.
interesting.
And so they figured out a way to do that. They had to, like, advance the CGI technology to do that. And they also built a big ass Golden Gate Bridge set to shoot the entire
Yeah.
climactic battle on,
Oh,
which
that's
is
cool.
rad.
Yeah, they go to
but yeah,
town
like
on that.
the rest of it, whatever. I don't really care.
It probably is like the last 30 minutes of that movie. Once he
That's
gets
awesome.
captured and he's like realizing like he can't trust humans anymore, and he starts like working with the other apes in that facility to break free. From there on, it's really good.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, James Franco's not really in those parts at all. Like,
It's true.
It's about from when James Franco stops being a character and it's just Caesar's movie.
Yes.
I think looking at it too, Rise sort of as a subversion of the Planet of the Apes is fun. Like the beats, the hints that it gives, like back where it like flips everything from Planet of the Apes is kind of fun.
Yep.
But yeah, it doesn't make it like an excellent movie, but I think it's good. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
But this one's definitely a lot better, and I like this is really where like we're examining new territory and trying to do something, trying to talk about something, like creating interesting characters on both sides, and the technology is just unbelievable. The way they look, like, is just and you just don't really even see this quality in everything else anyway. Like, this is really one standout of having like an animal character this realistic.
They had to
they do-
like hand adjust the facial animations because the actual like ape faces don't just map directly onto a human actor.
Right, yeah.
So it's like there's a lot of care
Yeah.
put into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say they cheat the faces some to give it more human aspects, and they do cheat. The eyes have whites, which is not true for apes, but
Yeah.
it would not make us empathetic to that if we didn't see that, right? So that's part of like why humans are empathetic to each other is the whites in the eyes, and dogs have that, and that's what makes us empathetic.
That's
why
also
don't
why
eat
we
dogs.
fire when we see the whites of the eyes.
Yes,
Oh, God, I don't want to feel empathy. Anything but that.
Well, Dixon, would you recommend Dawn of the Planet of the Apes?
Yes, would definitely recommend. Was very pleasantly surprised by this. Just very impressive technically, and discusses a lot of interesting ideas that I think we've touched on a little in this podcast, and I think it's a rewarding watch for sure. Also, again, just love seeing Jason Clarke in an earnest, like, hero, like, protagonist role, and he was great. I wish he had more opportunities to do that, to not, rather than just being like a sneering evil villain or the guy who ends up being the traitor in every movie.
right.
Yeah. It's just nice to see him humanized.
Is this the most Gary Oldman looks like Gary Oldman movie?
Yeah, he was pretty close to Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, maybe.
I feel like he had just gotten off the set of Dark Knight Rises and just walked onto this movie.
Yeah,
kept going.
basically.
Yeah.
Very much so. Well, there you have it, folks. A roundtable of recommends proving that co-hosts together strong. And with that, I have been your host, John Garcia. Thanks for listening. With us, as always,
Brian King. No apes were harmed in the making of this podcast. Some might have been offended.
and
Michael Dixon, there were definitely some apes offended during this podcast for sure. Thanks for putting up with our ape shit.
hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.